This episode of the Answer is Yes Baja Sessions is brought to you by Baja Bound Insurance Services. Driving to Mexico? You can buy and print out your Mexican auto insurance policy online in minutes with their easy-to-use website. They also have great travel information to help you plan your trip south of the border. Visit bajabound.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's Baja Sessions podcast. It's a part of the Answer is Yes, which we broadcast on Wednesdays. And today is one of those special opportunities where Ryan Thomas and I are in the living room of Bruce Meyers. And I just want you to sit back, know that this is going to be probably a two-part show. And we're going to learn a lot about a gentleman that has changed many lives and has affected a lot of people. And in the 5 minutes that I've been sitting in the living room, I've already gained a wealth of knowledge about Bruce. And Ryan, you're sitting to my right. And Bruce is cozied up on the couch. We've got the cat running around. It smells like toast in here. And I couldn't be any more comfortable. So, Bruce, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and telling us some of your life story.
You know, you guys coming into my home and doing this is such a pleasure because, first of all, it's a very honorable thing that you're doing. And I don't know that I'm the guy for that. But I feel like you're doing something. That. You're doing something that's touching on history. It seems to me, I was just saying it a few moments ago, that I'm at the beginning of things.
Yeah.
I'm a World War II vet, and yet I've done so many things in my life, and they're so different from one side of my life to another. But I'm not a guy that is about management or concerned about profit. And somehow I just do what I've done as more of a child. I've never really grown up. There's something about that connection of me and my personality that seems to be a big part of why things were successful, like the Dune Buggy. I'm the guy that created the first fiberglass Dune Buggy. Not the first Dune Buggy. Dune Buggies were already here, but they were handmade and they were made out of steel tubing and aluminum and so forth. And that's fine. The only thing they had in common was they all had four wheels and an engine. There was a Volkswagen in the back. From there on, they were as different as the people that created them. I came along with a huge background in the arts. I spent 6 or 7 years in the art world in big city art schools, teaching life drawing, figure drawing, and portraiture. So that is a kind of a sensitivity that goes way beyond the creation of a dune buggy. Most people think of a dune buggy in a mechanical way. It's like I wrote a little book called Bruce Meyers' Call to Baja. And it started off-road racing. Now, writing a book about off-road racing is fine, except that off-road racers don't read books. They'd rather twist the screws on a carburetor. So the problem for me is that I'm getting philosophical when you write books, but the book is all about how that started. The off-road world was simply a handful of little dune buggies putting around in a place called Baja, which had a mysterious something about it, and we were drawn to that because it was all about history. When it went to Ensenada, anything beyond Ensenada, there was no hotel or motel or anybody waiting for you. No gasoline, no nothing. You had to carry it all, and you had to sit in a rancho and wait for the gas truck maybe 2 days from now. So we were wandering around in this mysterious place, mostly interested, for me at least, and my friends, in the history. Because missions that were there 200 or 300 years had been put in by men that came around the Horn, down the Atlantic, up the Pacific, and into this place. Here you are looking at this rusting machinery out in the countryside 40 miles from the water. How in the hell did it get there? My God, those guys had grit. Oh, they had huge balls. These guys must have really wanted, and somebody put money up on that. I wonder if they ever made an investment. But digging around looking for gold or whatever they were looking for. And then the other thing was the church. And the religious thing was so strong that old Junipero Serra built a whole bunch of churches. They were supposed to be a day's walk from each other. I have no idea how you could walk that far, but there's 24 of them in Baja, 21 of them in California, 45 altogether. And so the 24 of them in Baja, we wanted to go see them. And we're looking at all this stuff laying around, and they're just mounds of dirt. Some of the churches have been restored and taken care of. There's like 3 great ones, beautiful. And we've been through those. See, so I wasn't there for off-road racing. I was there to examine why Baja existed. And either you had a crossroad where there was a church or a mine. And those guys that dug those holes, my God, how they must have done. They didn't have any fork trucks. They didn't have any steam engines. They were doing everything by hand. And they carried all this heavy machinery 40 and 50 miles from the water. So I was in awe of history. So we heard about these guys playing around with motorcycles, and they set a record. The Eakins and their friends. And Ted Mangles, he was with us. He said, I think we can beat those bikes. And I thought, I don't see how you can, because those bike riders are the best in the world. They're movie stunt riders and all that stuff. And he says, no. And he comes to me on an evening when I was shutting down. The people had just gone home from my office. He's got a great big map under his arm, and he crawls around the floor. He says, I've already done this. I'm going to ask you to do it, but put down what you think it'll take to go from this point to this point. 5 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, whatever. ABC, 1, 2, 3. And he went from the top to the bottom. Took an hour or so. So I did it. I didn't know what his answer was. And when I got all done, my God, you could have feasibly beat the bikes by over 10 hours.
Wow.
The bike riders had done it in something under 40 hours, 39 something. They'd done this twice. In 1962 and then again in 64, 2 years later. They only beat their old record by 8 minutes. And yet we beat them feasibly by 10 hours. And I said, you're right, we could do it. And now that was on a Monday night. On Tuesday, I'm standing in my shop looking at the welding bottles. And I take out a book of measurements. A bottle will hold 6 or 7 or 8 gallons or something. And I thought, well, 3 of those will give me 25 gallons. The car holds 15 gallons. That's 40 gallons. Now, we had guessed that maybe it might make 15 miles to a gallon in the buggy with a stock Volkswagen engine. And you'd never be in first. You'd never be in fourth. You're always in second or third gear. So it was really a lot of guesswork. But we guessed that maybe we could go down there in a feasibility run by driving buggies. And we had a couple of others with us as chase cars. I drove during that down there, and then we stop at night. Then our chase.
I got to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
This is the very first Baja 1000 pre-run that he's talking about. The very first pre-run, Mr. Bruce Meyers is telling us about it right now.
Didn't even know it.
It's a good thing I'm old.
Well, I'm amazed, Bruce, at your ability to recall things that you recall like they're yesterday. And it's fascinating to sit here and listen to you talk about it. So continue, please.
I've been trying to write a book, and I have to do that. I have to recall something over 50 years ago. I'm right now arguing on the emails with Vic Wilson, who won the very first race. And he says, no. And I say, yes. And so we're arguing about things we can't remember. Okay, back to where I was. What was I talking about? Anyway, we went down there on a feasibility run with Old Red, the original Meyers Manx, #1, and a couple of others that decided to follow us for fun. And we got to Baja, or to La Paz in 29 hours or something. My God, we beat the bikes theoretically by 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we got to turn around and go from south to north, back to Tijuana. But we have to authenticate it, and so we go to the people in Mexican authority, and we go to the police station. I explain what I'm trying to do to the police captain, and he listens, and then he says, why? Why what? Why are you trying to do this? Well, because it hasn't been done. Isn't this like the mountain that hasn't been climbed yet? I guess. And he couldn't figure that. He didn't see what that was all about. He says, but if you must do this crazy thing, I think you should go to the tourism department. So he directed us to the tourism department, and we walked in, and they said, yes, we can do this. We have a radio message we can send to Tijuana. We'll tell them that you're leaving as of some moment, and then when you get there, you go into the police station, and they'll say you are now here. So that'll set your record.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's wonderful, except that when we got to the police station, the desk sergeant couldn't speak any English. We spoke so little Spanish, it didn't do us any good. He didn't know who we were. So we had to say, where in the hell is the tourism department? We got in this car now that is so broken. The transmission mount's all gone, and it's running on 3 cylinders, and it's limping, but it still ran. And we limped over to the tourism department, and there's an office sitting there with the door shut, and it says hours 8 to something, and it's now 9 o'clock. We fall asleep. We hear the door being opened at 9:30 or 10, and we walk in, and we say, we're the guys that, yeah, I know who you are. He says, you come in now. I said, but we've been in town for over 2 hours. We got there actually in about 32 hours because we'd broken and had to work on the car. Brake lines that went away. We had 3-wheel brakes, and the transmission coming loose, and the engine all flopping around, and we had a lot of time screwed up. We didn't do it as quickly as we had going down in the feasibility run, but we still broke the bike record by 7 hours. But the Mexicans cheated us out of 2 because they didn't come to work on time. So we still broke them by almost 5 hours, 4 hours and 35 minutes or something. Any rate, that's the way the very first thing was done. Now, first record setting. Now, my wife Shirley worked at Road and Track magazine. This is where the big deal is, because the Road and Track magazine they said, "Come to our house and we'll drink to your victory." And we came to their house on Lido Island, Newport Beach. And John says to Elaine, he says, "Isn't there a list of all the people in the world that should know about this?" Who in the hell's that? Well, now, Road and Track has every management person of every car manufacturer in the world, Europe, Japan, everywhere. All the PR types, all the editors of car magazines. There's 45 magazines. All the writers for those magazines. So there's this list of about 1,000 people. They, because they're literate type people in their offices, 33 people, I think, in Road and Track. I was in there a lot because my wife worked there. She ran the advertising desk. And they decided that there ought to be a press kit put out to all these 1,000 people around the world. And so they created the press kit. It says, "Buggies beats bikes in Baja." And that's about us. And so the very first race, I think, drew 68 people, something like that. And we were met at the Bull Ring in Tijuana about 6 or 8 weeks later after this first record run. And the place is full of 4-wheel drives, Jeeps, and Broncos, and the boys from the backcountry with their 4-wheel drives. And they looked at our little Dune Buggy and said, "What do you think you're going to do with them damn things?" I said, "Well, we did pretty good. We set a record." "Well, you ain't going to do it now." Every one of those 4-wheel drives broke. They dotted the landscape, and we won. In the very first 6 automobiles in off-road racing, 5 of them were Meyers Manx's. The Meyers Manx was the perfect little ambulatory thing that rattled down a dirt trail very nicely because it has, you know what this is? That's called trailing arm suspension. See how it just went away and came back? That's better than these things that go up and down with all these vectoring forces. Not to say that they aren't good. They've gotten better than everybody, but the little Volkswagen at that time, with its suppleness, and the course was the cars were only 1,400 pounds, and the right wheelbase, they were not about the same length, but much lower, and so all their dynamics were better than a 4-wheel drives. I write an article, it's in my book, about Drino Miller. He worked for me, he was in the shop, and I'd heard that Ed Perlman was going to set the first 4-wheel drive record with a couple of Toyota Land Cruisers with their engines removed with Chevys in them. And now makes it dangerous right there. Just making the driver feel like he's a racer.